Thanks.
Which seat would you like?
I'll give you that one.
All right.
I have a new appreciation for these chairs.
It's all right, the formula.
I'm also still a little excited by all the sex going on in this room. I don't know what the after party is going to be like. I have a question for the audience first. Is that how many of you are at this point involved in or have business ideas that have something to do with the healthcare industry? Well, not a lot, but a good number. So I think one of the exciting things about having Glen here is that, you know, and I do a lot of writing about technology and how it's an effect on society and business, and there's probably no area that's being more affected by technology than healthcare, more opportunity there than probably any space you could possibly find. So, and Glen will, I'm sure, tell you all about that, but also about his own experiences. And so the first thing I want to do is, because, you know, like there's a lot of things that go on, technology and healthcare that are, you're so far away from me. It's better. Yeah, it's better. Like,
we can have more sex now.
Exactly.
Kind of the first step is...
Yeah, no, you gotta get a little closer.
Getting closer.
Yeah. A lot of it is stuff that, you might encounter as a consumer. What you do is something much deeper behind the scenes, but still has a very big impact. So first thing we really need to do is have you explain what it is that metadata does.
Sure. I'm gonna steal the old tagline of a company called BASF. I'm sure many people have heard of it. They effectively make chemicals, and their old tagline was, we don't make the products that you use, but we make the products that you use better. Medidata doesn't make drugs. We don't make pharmaceuticals or medical devices, but we make the drugs that you use better. And we were a New York founded company. We were a bunch of physicians and scientists, and we were in the business, effectively, of trying to help create new drugs, and very frustrated by how difficult it was to actually gather all the information that you needed to determine how a new compound or a new device could be looked at. Is it safe? Is it effective? Who are the perfect patients to marry up with this new therapy? And we're actually kind of a science story, not a technology story, but it turned out that we realized one of the missing ingredients in how people interacted, how doctors and life sciences companies and patients interacted. What was missing was technology. And we came up with some interesting ways to plug all those people together. And that was about 15 years ago. What we do now is we service the life sciences industry, and we allow all those constituents around the world to collaborate on our platform.
So let me go a little deeper on this. Okay. So like you're a drug company, or any other medical company. You've got something you need to try.
Yep.
To figure out if it works, get it through the FDA, whatever. Before you came along, that was a mess.
That was a mess, and not just a mess, but a mess of paper. So for those who raised their hands, hopefully somebody's going to cure cancer, or at least, as those of you who raised your hands very well know, one of the underlying molecular mechanisms that can cause what everybody commonly calls cancer. But if you've discovered that in the lab, you do have to go through a rigorous process, as you should. We're talking about human lives here. To get that FDA approval, get that approval in Europe, get it in Asia, or whatever countries you want to sell your drug in. And it used to be that the way that was done is you would find hundreds, sometimes thousands, in some cases even tens of thousands of patient volunteers, people willing to take this drug before it went on the market. All their data would be gathered. This is where it really got messy.
They could be spread out all over.
They could be in 115 countries. Yeah. All their information would be gathered on paper, in systems that different laboratories had, so all their blood work would be in different systems, depending on what the kind of therapy you were making was. Maybe you'd have images that were in various radiology devices, et cetera, et cetera. That would all have to be assembled, and what we would call, in kind of a term of art in our industry, you'd have to make sure it's compliant and clean, compliant with laws, and clean, meaning that we're going to make some really important decisions about whether or not people can ingest or have implanted in them this drug or this device. We better make sure that all the numbers that we're putting into that formula to determine if it's safe and effective are correct. And that's where the paper led to even more mess. So we started our company around the time, probably things that many people in this room who are still students don't remember. There was this application called Netscape. It was, version 3 was in beta. I mean, this was like medieval Barbary of the internet. But we said maybe there's a way to use this crazy thing called the internet and take all that data that was on paper, combine it with all that information that was in laboratory systems and those images and whatever information needed to be assembled. And not just assemble it, but we really thought that we could start to have people think in new ways about how to mathematically even look at that information. And again, for those in mathematics or in life sciences, again, I use the term medieval Barbary. I think even today, you look at how clinical trial practices are typically run. They're done using techniques, this is not something I came up with, this is a guy who's the head of research and development at Merck. He said, we're doing like 21st century medicine, but we're doing clinical trials that Hippocrates would have been really proud of. And there are other ways that you can actually look at information, and that people like Facebook and Google look at information every day. And so we're trying to create infrastructure that life sciences companies and doctors and nurses can use to look at information in those new modern ways too.
So ultimately, if I understand this, ultimately there's two things that are maybe important things that come out of what you do. One is actually streamlining the whole process for these companies so it happens faster, it happens better, it happens more accurately.
Yep.
But the other thing that ends up happening is you end up with a tremendous amount of data that these companies can look at in different ways and maybe be able to look at that data and say, you know what, we were on the wrong track, or whatever might come out of that. Right?
Yeah, it's the way we kind of think about our company, and I actually I say this to everybody who's trying to start something or has started something. One of the lessons we learned along the way, and we did get it wrong a couple times, you really have to think about value. What value are you creating through what you build or what you do? But we see our value in 4 very distinct buckets. One is we're a cloud company. We take things that were in computers in people's basements and we put it online. Yeah. That's valuable to IT organizations. We save people money by getting rid of all that paper and all that crazy stuff that used to happen. So that's another value bucket. A third is that we can accelerate time to market. So if it took you 10 years to get this new therapy to market, well, maybe we can get it to market in 9 years or 8 years if we help you run the processes faster. That has tremendous economic value for our clients. Yeah. The fourth one, though, and I think this is one of the really exciting ones to us, because we came to this as life sciences people, is the idea of increasing therapeutic value. And one of the problems with doing clinical trials the old way is that it's actually quite effective at finding really good medicine that works for huge swaths of people with very general indications. That's why the pharmaceutical industry was so successful, finding things that lowered blood pressure. Mm-hmm. A lot of people suffer from that. You can get it down pretty simply, organically, in a physiological way. But as medicine starts to get more complicated, and it certainly has, right? In the 21st century, we're looking at biomarkers. Every patient is unique. We're trying to look at a patient's physiology on a more instantaneous basis. People use the phrase personalized medicine, which I kind of find hilarious. Personalization is really hard, and medicine is really hard. So it's not really a great entrepreneurial idea to put them together, but actually, of course it is.
Small market.
But to do that, you need to think about what I said before. Matching patients, the right patients with the right medicine, and that's that fourth kind of bucket of value. Mm-hmm. Can we help increase the therapeutic value, and therefore the economic value, of the average drug, the average device that's brought to market, given to the average patient? Mm-hmm. And that requires looking at things in new and different ways. So it's not just saving time and money, it's really trying to create a different world for life sciences.
Yeah. And how big is Medidata now?
It sounds weird to say it, so Medidata is about 1,000 people worldwide. We'll do over $300 million in revenue. We went public a couple years ago. We've got about a $3 billion market cap. I think those of us who were there when we started it still think of ourselves as doctors and scientists, and that hasn't changed. But yeah, the company's gotten pretty big.
So let's roll the wheel backward a little bit. That's not an obvious business to go into. So how did this happen? Where was the point of inspiration? How did you come to this?
So our business was really born of need. And if you didn't intuited from what I just said. I think a lot of people wake up in the morning, maybe all of you, maybe not all of you, but you look in the mirror and there's like a word or two that's over your head that defines you. That word for me is still scientist. We were frustrated by what we couldn't get done, and we were inspired to come up with some new way to do it. Had I not been working on a project where I was the low guy in the totem pole who had to do all the work, to assemble all the paper and do all the math and know from my undergraduate classes that there were better statistical techniques to do what I was being asked to do, and I not had that level of frustration, I don't think we would have gone and started the company.
Well, wait, I'm gonna make you roll this back a little bit even more, because there's probably a lot of, especially students in here, who are like, they wonder how they're gonna run across that idea that really, hits for them. My understanding, right, you were at Carnegie Mellon.
I was.
You were studying what there?
So I was studying biology.
You're studying biology.
And I went to Carnegie Mellon because I was always interested in computer science, but my purpose in life was to be a biologist.
And at the same time, you were taking a lot of computer science classes.
Yes.
So you were familiar with both worlds. And again, from what I understand, you got involved in alumni and fundraising from alumni.
Okay, so
right?
Yes, I can tell you that
okay,
story.
No, because this is how ideas land in your lap, and you suddenly realize it's a thing to do with your life, right? So please tell the story.
So my butterfly flapping its wings that created the hurricane of my life was I desperately needed beer money, and
it's about how it always starts.
It often does. Perhaps tonight it will as well. I took a job phoning alumni to get them to give donations. And you made, I'm not sure how it works at NYU, you made almost no money, but there was an amazing commission scheme. So if you could get somebody to give more than they did last year, you got $1. And if they would put on their credit card, you got another $1, and et cetera, et cetera. And they would give you this stack of cards and had all the names of the people you were going to call and what they did when they were at Carnegie Mellon and what their majors were. And I looked at this guy's card and I thought, wow, biology major, physician, lives in New York. I'm going to make like $5 off this guy. Like, I got this. And I call him up, and we start talking, and we completely hit it off. I think I blew it for the evening because I spent too much time talking to him and not going through my stack. But he said, why don't you come to visit me at Columbia Presbyterian when you're back in New York, and I'd love to show you my lab.
You grew up in New York.
I grew up in Manhattan. I knew I was coming back. Half people I think who grew up in New York disappear, and the rest of us are stuck here like fruit flies. And so I immediately come back, and I had gone to visit his lab along the way, and we really hit it off. I hit it off with, he was an MD, I hit it off with the PhD who ran the lab, and I thought, wow, I think I'd really like to work here for a while. And I wound up taking this job. I wound up working on a bunch of projects, and one of them just happened to get really hot clinically. It was a very basic science idea. If you're interested in the quick biology.
Please, give us a little bit.
Yeah, so the prostate, right? Only men have it. There's, for those who haven't taken anatomy yet, there's something called PSA, so prostate-specific antigen. It's a protein that's made only in the prostate. And so if you are a guy and you are walking around and there is a lot of this protein, PSA, in your blood, that means there's something wrong. There's too much of it getting out of your prostate. And what we did is we kind of took it a step further. And we said, well, let's take people's blood and let's look in that blood for the RNA that encodes the prostate-specific antigen. And if we see that there, that means that not only is there stuff from the prostate in the bloodstream, but there's actually prostate cells there. And they shouldn't be there unless this patient has the potential for metastatic cancer. And what we did is we used that to stage patients and make sure that we only put people through surgery who were actually candidates for surgery. They wouldn't have their prostate taken out and 5 years later, say, oh, well, you had your prostate out, but now you have bone metastases from prostate cancer. So that was a really interesting assay. It was very hard to do. It was very hard to do accurately. I spent a year doing 2 sets of 96 reactions per set, analyses of that. It was incredibly boring. I loved the science, but I hated being at the lab bench doing all that stuff. And all these people wanted to now replicate our work. And like I said, I was the low guy in the totem pole. And they said, well, Glenn, you're the one who has to administer coordinating all these different centers who are going to collaborate on this project. And that was basically the moment when, with the guy across my lab bench, also fortuitous, he was a surgeon or a surgical resident, also low man on the totem pole. He was actually the first guy I went to when I realized how bad all the clinical trial software was at the university. Mm-hmm. I said, we must have something good when we were working with these big pharma companies like Pfizer and Takeda, right? Can you show me some of their good software? And he's like, no, it's all a piece of shit. It's a disaster. Like this whole industry is a mess. And he and I just started sitting around and playing with ideas that turned into Medidata.
Uh-huh. That's a great story, by the way.
Thanks.
Now, so you have an idea. You're working in this lab. What were those next critical steps that actually got you going?
Well, I give you the next most critical step, and it's an example of business X. So I love this example. So myself and this surgical resident, urology resident, his name was Ed Ikaguchi, we decided to start the company. We decided to get serious. And one of our friends at the university, he was 10 years our senior, so he was an attending physician at the time, and he looked at us with these kind of sympathetic eyes, and he said, let me get this right. You're a doctor, Ed, and you're a scientist, Glenn, and you're going to start a company? That's a terrible idea. Like, you guys know nothing about money. You need to have somebody who understands something about money. And we were like, oh, great. Thank you, Alex. It's sage advice. Where do we find such a man? And Alex goes, after being so cool, he's like, I have no idea. But I went to college with a guy who I think does something related to money. I'll introduce you to him. And so he arranged for us to meet this guy. His name was Tariq Sharif. And Alex was right. His old college roommate did do something with money. He was working at a small private hedge fund, and we all met after work one day. Alex, the introducer, was about 2 hours late to the meeting because he was stuck in a case. He was stuck doing surgery. So Ed and Tariq and I were left to our own devices in this room together. And we did fall into business love. Not that there has to be business love for business sex, but it really was business love. We left that evening all excited about how we could collaborate and how our ideas were kind of coming together, even in just that 2-hour session. We weren't sure at that point if Tariq was going to be on our board or maybe put in some money, but we knew we were going to do something together. Fast forward 2 months. He took the desk chair from his office. He put his cathode ray tube on it, just to date us. There were no LCD panels back then. He put a file cabinet on top of that because he had files and we had no file cabinets in our office. We were all electronic. And he wheeled it about a mile down Park Avenue from where his old office was to ours, into the elevator, into the room that we were sitting in, on the other side of the desk to where I was sitting, and he and I have now shared an office for 15 years. So it was great business sex, that one. A very long relationship. In fact, we think with each other in person more than we've been with significant others, parents, siblings, anyone. So it's been a really interesting relationship.
Well, and especially for this, the would-be entrepreneurs out here. Like, so, what's special about that kind of arrangement where you have the one guy who's a business guy, a money guy, the other partners who are the more, whatever they are, creative, scientific, that kind of mind. How did that work for you, and why might that be important for somebody to consider when they're?
Yeah, I can't even imagine what it would have been like to not have Tariq as a partner for all these years. And first of all, it means very simply that you can be in 2 places at the same time, and that's great. And as we've now heard in a couple different ways, there are higher highs in starting or running a business than most people ever understand, and there are lower lows. And when you've got somebody else to lean against during those low lows, I think it makes it a lot easier. That said, we definitely started life thinking that we were kind of a yin-yang perfect complement for each other. We actually, since then, have taken some personality profile tests for fun. In fact, we're both yin or we're both yang. I'm not sure which one we are. We happen to be very similar. And over the years, what's really happened is he's become just as comfortable and just as well versed in life sciences and technology. He can do anything that I would be able to do on a kind of standard basis. I can go and meet with investors and do earnings calls and things that you would think that the science nerd is not going to be the one doing. Yeah. And it just has really become a very fluid collaboration. Certainly at our company, we just moved into a big new office. It's like 120,000 square feet downtown. We still share a room. And it sets an example for everybody else in the company that we want everybody to work that way. He likes listening to my telephone conversations. I like listening to what happens by his desk when he's in the office, because you just never know when one of those ideas is going to stick, and you'll have an opinion right away, or maybe 3 years later you'll remember that conversation. And so we try to set that example, and we have open offices everywhere. And you know, don't ask anybody to do what you wouldn't do yourself. Well, we not only tolerate doing that, we like doing it, and it's been part of our culture. And so,
and Tarek now is he's the CEO technically. You are technically the president and what, chief science officer? Or
no, I'm just president, co-founder. Okay. Yeah, I can tell you an interesting seedy underbelly story from Medidata if you promise not to tweet it. I don't care what you do. It was interesting. We started the company. Ed, who was the surgeon, he was the chief medical officer. I was the chief technology officer. Tarek was the chief financial officer, and we all ran the company in partnership. Now, over the years, Ed never really had an operational role. So as we went public, he does still our friend, but he doesn't have a day-to-day role in the company. But this is long before that anyway. We were 3 of us, and we were about to get our first venture investment. And so the guy had taken him a long time to want to invest in us, and he calls me on the phone. Up on the phone, and he says, Glenn, I think that we're ready to put money in the company, but it's great the way you guys work, but we really need the buck to stop somewhere. There needs to be a CEO. And as I am about to say, well, Ed, I really appreciate you saying that, and I'd be delighted to take it on. He's like, and I think it should be Tarek. So, yeah, he was the money guy, the more mature guy. We still run the company in partnership. Our org chart actually has, it's the 2 of us in a box, and we have our whole team reporting to the box, and we both sit on the board. And I think our titles actually make it clear to people interacting with the company, but I mean, the guys like my brother, my business lover, my business partner, and we just do everything together.
Was there a point early on when you thought you were doomed?
I think I thought I was doomed at about 11:15 this morning. I think I think that happens every day. Not in a paranoid way, but honestly, I think insecurity is a really important part of entrepreneurship. At least it was for us. I'm never the person to be, like I said, I'm not going to be paranoid and look around at what all of our competitors are doing and think, oh, they're getting ahead of us, or why aren't we doing it that way? I don't see that as productive. I think that insecurity comes more from, we need to make sure that we get all of our ideas to turn into reality as quickly as possible, and I think that insecurity breeds urgency. I actually think that a lot of people, I'm not casting aspersions on anyone in the room, but like myself, maybe you were a little introverted when you were a kid, you were a little nerdy, you were a little science geek, and sometimes that insecurity back then turns you into that kind of introverted person. I think in business, as you come to things with more of a confident attitude, I'm not sure if that insecurity is actually going away. It's just turning into urgency, right? And that urgency turns into, ultimately, for many people, and I think there's a lot of luck there too, but that's what breeds the success, because you're not sitting there on your laurels. And so pretty much every day I wake up panicky that we're not going to get done what we need to get done that day. I would hope that at some point that stops, but for 15 years I haven't seen any evidence that that's going to happen. So we felt doomed along the way lots of times.
So did you avoid like any real like sort of near-death experiences in the
Yeah, we avoided a lot of near-death experiences. We had all of our servers.
I guess if you didn't avoid them, you'd be,
yeah, we'd be dead.
But you know what I mean.
We had all of our servers running out of a closet in our office. This was before the days of Amazon Web Services and things like that. We had a backhoe cut our internet lines for a week, and all of our early clients' clinical trials basically ground to a halt.
Wow, that's bad.
Yeah, that was pretty bad.
That's bad.
One of my favorite things, we had a really tenacious salesperson, and he got us one of our first big at-bats at a big biotech on the West Coast. And we were so excited. We had a 2-day demo to prove that we were just as good as to us at the time, really big companies who were pitching them, that here's our electronic clinical trial infrastructure. And we go, and day one was awesome. It was like the best demo I'd ever given. The entire audience was blown away. Everything worked faster than even we thought it was going to work. And every question we got, we had a great answer for. Went back to the hotel. We had a bunch of drinks. We're feeling great. We go in for day 2. We start the day with said tenacious sales guy spilling what was probably a Starbucks cup, but in my mind now was a samovar of coffee onto the chief information officer's lap. So she ran out of the meeting and basically never returned. And then every single thing that we tried to show did not work. And we left feeling completely dejected. We were never going to get this account. We had put all of our time and money into making sure we were going to blow this pitch away, and we just completely blew it in a bad way. Our head of sales at the time, he was one of our early guys who we brought in as adult supervision. And this is sometimes where that becomes helpful. Right. He did not let us stay dejected in the parking lot. So I think that could have been a near-death experience were it not for him. And he said, okay, let me tell you what we're going to do. We're going to go back to New York. We're going to fix everything that didn't work. And we're going to email them all the information, all the logins and stuff that they would have needed to do what we were going to show them on day 2, to do the demo themselves. And we did. And they got them, and they started using it. And I remember sitting back in our office. We could watch the lights blink on the servers, because as I told you, they were in our closet. And we realized they had put together an entire clinical trial, in theory, and were playing with it, and they called us up, and we won the business. And I think we would have walked away, and like I said, and it was this guy, Steve Hirschfeld, who just forced us to have the gumption to keep trying when it just seemed like there was no hope. Yeah. So that was a good near-death experience.
And actually a good lesson, right?
A great lesson.
Yeah. Let's talk just for a second about the stages. So you started the company in what year?
So we started in 1999. We started the company when the bubble was bursting.
Good timing.
Which was great timing because it forced us to not think about burning money. It forced us to think about creating a profitable business from a cash basis where we made money, we made more money every day than we spent. And it took us from 1999 to 2001 to do that. But then we did that every day once we started that. So it was a good time to start.
So you started off with what money did you start off in the very, very beginning?
With our own personal money.
Your own personal money.
And then we raised $1 million from friends and family, and it was really friends and family. It was like 10 grand from this dude that you went to college with, and oh, somebody's mom just put in $50,000, great, you know. And it was a rough round to get together, but we got it together. We operated with that for a while. We were, as I said, cash flow break even, but things were getting really tight. I mean, we were more and more people. We were getting calls from the bank about not making payroll, and it was like, oh, did the check come? Oh, I can't imagine why we didn't make it. Could you just try to run it again? Like, run, get to the bank. So it was a little hairy, and we couldn't really invest in the business. So we found great VCs in the city. It was a group called Milestone that's still around, and they put about $1.5 million into us. We leveraged that for a while. Same thing happened. It was about 2004. Things were getting really tight. We had about, I would say maybe 50, got close to 60 employees. We had all that cash in the bank, but that's not a lot of cash when you're operating at the scale we were at. And so we raised another $10 million from another group whose praises I cannot sing highly enough, which is Insight Venture Partners. I never thought I was going to be advertising venture capitalists like this, but I have to say these guys were awesome to us over the years. And we operated with that until we went public. And as I said, we went public in 2009. the worst market in history, certainly to go public in. We seem to have a bad habit for choosing timing. And that's kind of, I guess, the arc of us from a corporate perspective, at least.
Why did you not put it off in 2009?
It's an interesting question. I have never had, Tarek has never had an exit strategy. So we didn't build our company to have some date that we were going to sell it. We didn't build it to take it public. I can tell you that pushing the NASDAQ button is a hell of a lot of fun. By the way, if you ever get to do it, spoiler alert, the button doesn't do anything. Button's just for show. We were so excited we forgot to push the button. Market opened anyway. Yeah, the market's still open.
I think I'm glad to hear that, actually.
At some point, we're like, woo, woo. This woman next to me is like, Glenn, can you push the button because the light goes on? I'm like, sorry. It was a great day, but it was just a day. It was a day in the history of the company. So our motivation for going public was threefold. We were competing against a much larger company at the time. They had always been the 800-pound gorilla in our industry.
This was
a company called Phase Forward. Friends with the founder. He's a great guy, but they were our arch enemy. And they were, I think in good faith, they probably didn't realize what was happening, but they were saying, oh, there's not a lot of runway in the world of electronic software and clinical trials. Well, it was that we were eating their lunch in the field. So what they saw as slowing growth was actually accelerating Medidata growth. They were talking about that to public markets. Our clients, heads of R&D and chief information officers and CEOs were hearing that. We said, we need to have a public forum where we can talk about what the opportunity is and how exciting it is to be a company like Medidata, or like Phase Forward for that matter. So that was one reason. Apropos to that, we were starting to sign really big contracts, and it got to the point where chief information officer, a head of R&D is looking at the contract and looking at Medidata, and you've got $10 million on your balance sheet and nothing to back that up, and it's all private information. We really wanted to do it as a way to create security for our clients. And frankly, the third was we've been running the company once again on fairly thin balance sheet, and we'd done a very small acquisition, kind of tuck-in complementary technology before our IPO, but we thought if we're ever going to do that again, which we did do once since, we should have some public currency to do that with. And so those were really the three reasons. It wasn't because an IPO was any kind of magical thing. We brought in a kick-ass chief financial officer. He had gotten us ready. He'd run a public company before. We knew everything we needed to know. We had everything ready to go. And there was this tiny little window when we could go out. So we said, let's do it. Yeah.
Were you getting pressure from the VCs to have a public?
No, we weren't. Our VCs, as I said, have been really, really good partners over the years. I think I can't say they weren't happy, but I happen to know that a lot of the people who wound up with stock from venture capital investments and some of the angels who went along with them still hold it. So I think they're still excited about the future of the company.
And by the way, you've been singing their praises. How did they help you, aside from being supportive of the money and all of that, but how did they help you, and what should people look for when they're trying to decide on who to have invest?
I'll say both the venture capitalists and honestly of some of the management that we've brought on board over the years, I think it's actually relatively rare, from everything that people have told me, to have founders still running a company that's 15 years later and has had some of the success that Medidata has had. I think it's because we've never shied away from having people who knew what to do better than we did around, and I would count those VCs who were so critical to us right in that group. They were mentors. They knew when to hold our hands. They knew when to show up and work through something with us on a Saturday all day. And they knew when to step away, or when they didn't agree with us about something and we just had our conviction it was the right thing to do. They said, all right, well, it's your guys' ask, but go for it. We'll let you do it. So they were great like that. And I mentioned our CFO, this guy Bruce Dalziel at the time, now his second in command is our CFO. This guy Steve Hirschfeld, who was our first sales guy. These are employees. These people who report to me or reported to me, but were just as much mentors, and really having the courage. It makes it sound more heroic than it really is, but being confident enough to realize that you don't know what you're doing around certain parts of your business, maybe even the part that you feel most connected to, which for me, for a long time was our technology. I'd written a lot of it. But bringing in those professional engineers, you actually make yourself a better engineer or a better technologist by doing that. And I just put the VCs and those key management hires in the same bucket. They were the ones who pushed me into ARC. They were the ones who made us better executives. They were the ones who turned Medidata's personality into what has kept it successful, I think.
Let me ask you one more thing, and then we'll open it up to questions out here. But so when you're, if you were to meet a young entrepreneur, having gone through what you've gone through, are there a couple of key things that you really think are like the key pieces of advice that you'd lay on somebody?
Yeah, absolutely. First is not to listen to all the people who tell you that your idea is bad. And that happened a lot of times along the way. I told you there was that big company out there, Phase Forward. The number of venture capitalists who have said to us over the years, why are you guys doing this? Go back to doing something else. They have first mover advantage. They're huge, you're tiny. And technology doesn't matter. We just didn't care. We knew our idea was good. The other thing that I think has been really important to us is to really embrace customer service. I think that applies to your clients. It applies internally too. I'll give you 2 examples to that end. One, we screw things up all the time. Everywhere you have human people doing things, you have the capacity for mistakes. And you just can't be flawless. The difference between different companies and different people are the people who make mistakes and then will do everything in their power to make sure that they make up for their mistakes. And our customers came to expect that, rely on it, and would always trust us even when we did something wrong. So we would have the humility to admit it, but the tenacity to make sure that we fixed it.
Yeah.
If it was somebody else who did something wrong, we would do the same thing. But I think that same kind of customer service attitude externally is something important internally in a company as well. The user experience of your employees, not just the user experience of your products, but we just think is critical. One of our really key early hires was to get a head of HR. A lot of people had told us not to do it. We said, we're only whatever we were, 14, maybe 20 people. We wanted somebody who woke up every morning and thought about what the employee experience was like and made sure that Medidata was a great place to work.
At 14 or 20 people, you wanted a head of HR?
People told us to use a consultant, and she might have been 22 when she came on board. I can't remember the exact number, but it made a huge difference in terms of being able to grow the company. And actually, apropos to what I said about Tarek and I being able to be in 2 places at the same time, there's a lot of stuff you got to do to not just learn how to manage people, but to do it on a day-to-day basis. And to have somebody who really understands how to do that, like I said, who's waking up every morning and making sure it gets done correctly all day was just a huge asset to us. And to me, that's customer service. It's just the customer is your employee.
Yeah, right. That's a really interesting point. We have like 10 or 15 minutes. We can do questions. Right, Frank? How long we still have? That much? Yeah, so anyone have questions?
See somebody raising their hand up there?
Is there a hand?
Yep, a couple.
You'd have to,
yeah. You guys are supposed to shout them out?
You might have to stand up. I'll get this one guy right here. You had your hand up? Yeah, you have to stand up and you have to talk loud. We don't have a mic to pass around, I guess.
Hi, I was just wondering, because you started this when you were very young, and you had a lot of people that were essentially probably many years you're elder. I'm not certain quite how, but how did you handle being the guy that all these guys who knew more than you and were older than you were reporting to you? How did you maintain their confidence, their trust, respect?
It's a good question. I think the people who we hired who were much more senior, certainly than me age-wise. I mean, I guess there are people who are almost 15, in one case maybe even 20 years older than me. I think you got to find the right people. We actually wound up hiring some people from really big companies, IBM. We got a couple of people now from Apple who were really senior. They didn't want to be at big companies anymore. They wanted to be at a smaller company, somewhere where they could move maybe faster than they moved before. And so I don't think there was ever an issue of, oh, why am I reporting to this little twerp? It was more like, this is a really cool company. This is an exciting opportunity. Glen's got all these great ideas. Left to his own devices, he's going to completely screw them up. I can help him make them work. And I think that was an exciting opportunity. And like I said, there are people who still report to me. I have to do their performance reviews and tell them all the things they're doing wrong and look at them with a straight face when I say, well, I really think there's a few things you need to learn about management. But you just get used to it, and I think it makes a nice dynamic. And the fact of the matter is I'm probably asking them that question because I want them to do something that they taught me about the year before. And that's actually a pretty effective management technique. Sometimes I'll say, oh, remember when you told me about this? Maybe you should try to do that too. It usually works pretty well. I think there were a couple of people up there.
Yeah, I didn't see. I can't see from where I'm, but point to them. And
somebody by the door raising their hand? Yep. Yeah, so the question was, you know, if I paraphrase, how do you kind of validate your market and define it at the moment you're getting started? It's kind of like worrying about things falling apart. We still think about that every single day. I don't think that process ever really ends. The analogy that I like to think about is, it's like taking a picture through a camera. You're looking through the lens, and you know what direction you're looking at. Everything's still blurry. And as you tighten the focus on that picture, you kind of adjust where your head is pointing, and it's this constant process of honing that. It's fun to find your old business plans and go back and see what you were right about with your market or what you were wrong about or how you thought it would develop and what was completely wrong. We were definitely wrong about some things. We just had this conviction that we knew there was a lot of money spent on clinical trials. We knew that a lot of it was spent badly. We knew that doing clinical trials was something really important, and we knew that we personally really cared about it being done better, right? Because that was what we had all grown up, at least to become professionals, to do. And it was kind of that intersection that gave us everything we need to say, let's go for it. I think when we first said, you know, what the total market opportunity was for our company, maybe we were talking about 10 or tens of millions of dollars, and probably because our product did, you know, this much stuff. And as the years have gone on, now we look at what is really, you know, a total market opportunity of billions. That obviously is a lot different than where we started. So we didn't have to have that big number back then. We just focused on the bits that we wanted. And to take my analogy to an almost stupid conclusion, I guess as the years went on, we just kept widening the angle of that camera lens and starting to look beyond just the very specific things that we started with what was around it and how we could kind of open that marketplace up organically over time, or organically and with acquisitions over time.
Yes, we have one fellow right here. Yeah.
So earlier in your interview, you talked about how most medical trials are what make the Hippocrates proud. So now you've got this huge infrastructure using the internet and data and cloud computing infrastructure. Have you considered expanding that to, you know, not just providing the data infrastructure for old-style trials, and actually like investing in trying to create a new style of trial with that infrastructure?
Yeah, so the question was, are we trying to do the kind of trials that Hippocrates would look at and go, what are you doing? Again, paraphrasing. And yeah, we absolutely are. I'll give you a really interesting example. Before I got obsessed with biology, I was obsessed with physics. So I really like finding situations where you can not break them, obviously, but start ignoring laws of physics that used to hinder people who were doing what you did before. And so if you were testing a new drug 20 years ago, a year ago, the only way to get good, accurate data about a person was to physically transport them to be in front of a healthcare professional, a doctor or nurse, who would evaluate them. And again, I don't want to give you guys a clinical trials lesson, but there's something called a 6-minute walk test. and you take your watch off and you tell a patient to walk up and down a hallway for 6 minutes, and you see how many times they walked up and down the hallway, and you use that to figure out if their cardiac medication is working, if they're less likely to die from COPD. And when you think about that, I mean, that really is medieval. We're taking 6 minutes in front of a doctor to figure out if this person has a physiological change in their entire cardiothoracic system. That's absurd. It works. You know, it doesn't mean it's mathematically poorly founded. It doesn't mean that people who use that in clinical trials were doing a bad job for 40 years. That was the best way you could measure that. But today, we don't have to spend the energy, right? That's the physics analogy, to move the person from their home or from their job to being in front of that doctor or nurse. You can send them home with their Fitbit. You know, I used to wear a Fitbit until I realized that my cell phone had everything that my Fitbit did. So now I just use my phone, and we're all going to have our iWatches and things. And I think now we can instrument the world in different ways than we did before. We are trying to be at the forefront of how people use that instrumentation in clinical trials today. So that's another great example, actually, of how our market has changed completely. Right now, directly connecting with the patient is exciting today and is going to be the standard of care in the future. And we see ourselves at the intersection of making that happen. That certainly wasn't in our original business model. It's completely aligned with our original mission of doing a better job of gauging safety and efficacy. But I think unless you're willing to put yourself out there and kind of put your money where your mouth is and help whatever industry or people you're serving do things differently, they're not going to get there on their own. If they were, they'd be entrepreneurs too. Right? So you've got to be the one who's willing to say, hey world, there's another way to operate, there's another way to do this, and I'm going to show you how it gets done. Does that make sense? Answer your question?
Great, thanks. Sure, woman right here, yeah, please.
Okay.
No, we got, sorry, someone.
Want to go behind you?
Yeah, let's do this and then we'll grab you.
Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
Come. Yes, please. Don't sit down yet.
All right, in listening to you, it sounds like you found the sweet spot very early, and you and your team learned to pivot and stay within the sweet spot.
Mm-hmm.
So my question's a little bit different, especially for the students. On an obstacle to success, what would you say personally is your biggest one, and what have you found to be most useful at those moments?
While pivoting?
While pivoting and while just building all of this, what's been hardest for you to do, and what did you do that worked?
Yeah, so the hardest thing along the way for me was stopping micromanaging and stopping trying to do everything myself. Delegation and the ability to tolerate other people's mistakes, it was very difficult for me to learn. I think it's probably difficult for lots of entrepreneurs to learn, so listen. Because you're probably all willing to make 1,000 mistakes yourself, because you've got that optimism, you've got that view of the world, and if you're like me, watching other people make those mistakes that you would have made yourself is just hugely frustrating. You want to tear your hair out. And if you don't learn how to do that, then they're never going to get better at their job the way you get better at it doing that. So that was a very difficult thing for me. And I think the thing that was most useful for me was just ludicrous optimism. And again, we heard that already. Without that, I think you're just, you're almost doomed by definition, because there's going to be so many challenges. You just have to be that one person. And I learned it sometimes by not having it myself. The one guy in the parking lot who says, "Don't worry, guys, we're gonna get through this."
Interesting. Good. Yes,
Should I,
please.
should I turn around?
Yeah, you might have to.
So
Yeah.
everybody can hear me? Quick question with respect to raising money along the way and the timing. You said you started the company, had $1 million of friends and family money.
Yep.
Then you got to your first professional round of money, which was $1 million. Okay, then you went to a $10 million round. Can you kind of explain the process, the thought process behind when do we, why did we do this, at which time, what kind of valuation are we going to go out for? How much of the company are we going to give away in order to raise that money?
Yeah, so the
I
question,
want you to repeat it, yeah.
Yeah, so the question is,
sure.
how do you think about when to raise money, and how do you think about valuations? Now I will sound cynical about the world of venture capital. Raising money sucks. It's a horrible process. It's a huge distraction to running your business. And so I think the more you can avoid doing it, the better. Every time we raised money, it was because we had to raise it. Not because we were going to run out of it, but because not having enough of it was a barrier to us getting our business to the next level. And so I wouldn't do it just because you can do it. For anybody who's done research on Medidata, you may think that I'm speaking out of both ends of my mouth because we just raised a $275 million convert and we're not doing anything with it. But there are times when people just want to give you money and it's just crazy not to take it. But that's different than going out and busting your ass for a quarter or a year and a quarter to try to raise it. So I think in that VC context, trying not to do it is important. Sorry, the next bit of your question was on the valuation, right? So this will also potentially sound really cynical. As far as I can tell, venture capitalists want 1/3 of your company. So if you realize you need $1 million, tell them that your company is worth $2 million before you raise money. If you need $30 million, tell them that your company is worth 60 or worth 40 and it's going to be worth 60. And I think if you're outside of that range, at least in my very limited experience, that's where they're going to wind up. So use reverse psychology against them. It doesn't mean they're bad people. That's just the rule of thumb, as far as I can tell.
We're pretty much out of time. I want to ask you one last thing, because I know there was one thing you wanted to get to, and that was the New York tech scene and what kind of influence that had on you and on Metadata being the kind of company it is. And then we're going to have to wrap up, and you can get swamped by the mouth.
I'm glad I have a chance to talk to you about New York. I don't mean to make it sound like I have a New York chip on my shoulder. I was born and raised in Manhattan. Unless it's to cross an ocean, I try not to cross water. And I do have a huge chip on my shoulder about New York. I think that there's something about the way people operate in the city. Maybe it's not constantly having sex, but it's constantly bumping into each other. It's what created our company. It was me bumping into this guy at the lab bench and us bumping into this guy who a friend of ours had gone to college with. And we weren't all technologists. I know there's a talk later like entrepreneurship, and it's not all about tech. I mean, I think it's about life. And I think people in New York are busy, motivated people trying to get shit done, and that's what creates that moment when you go, oh, I can do this a better way. Doesn't mean that, again, if you live in Silicon Valley, you're a bad person, but I think a lot of people out there are saying, oh, I want to use technology to improve something, or I want to do something better. What can I do better? And I think in New York, you just got a great environment where it's, oh, I've got a problem. How can I solve it with technology or something else? And we just see New York as an awesome place to start a company because of that kind of buzz and interaction of people. So you guys are in the right place.
All right, great, Glenn. Thank you very much.
Thank you all very much.
Nice. It's fun.